Tell us how long you've been in flooring.
I grew up in upstate New York, where my dad had a retail flooring shop, so I grew up around floors.
All right, Danny, you ready to talk about hardwood?
You know it.
Why is hardwood a growing market?
There's a lot of factors, but to me, the biggest factor is the improvements in finishes. I look back at the last condo boom, 2004, 2005, 2006. That technology wasn't great. Everything was aluminum oxide. The floors looked like they had a fake sheet of glass across the surface of it, something like this. Whereas now, the finishes, they're penetrating finishes, where it goes into the pores of the wood. And the big difference is, now if I get a heel mark or a scratch in this floor, it's no longer an eyesore. When everything was this sheet of glass and one little indentation inside a 1,000 square foot unit, now we've got an eyesore. But with these improvements in finishing, it's not just multifamily, it's hospitality, it's corporate, it's retail. There's all sorts of applications where you can use a wood floor where you would have been petrified to do so even 10 years ago.
Can you tell us about engineered versus solid hardwood?
So if you look on the panels up here on the walls, you'll see that there's engineered and there's solid, but you can't tell just by looking at it, right? So on the surface, by the time these products are finished, there's not much of a visual difference. A couple of the big things that I like about engineered is now I'll glue with confidence. So if I want to glue the wood floor, engineered is definitely the way to go. We can also go wider, okay? I get very nervous doing a solid wide board just because of how much wood moves, particularly in the width.
Can you talk us through engineered and just give us an analogy in layman's terms?
I guess the most simple analogy would be to describe it as a sandwich. Engineered floors means that there's layers that are put together to give the product balance. There's all different types of ways of doing it, so I've got a couple constructions here. This is probably your most day in and day out, I guess your PB&J. The most commonly used construction, you've got a plywood core and then the veneer on the surface. That plywood is what helps to give this engineered product stability. I guess this is your bagel with some cream cheese. You've got this HDF core and then the wood veneer basically laminated to that core. A very stable product. And then we get the performance of the product and the density of this fiberboard core. This is one of my favorites, so the Italian hoagie. So this one has a cross finger construction where those fingers interlace, which give this product a lot of balance. In terms of how the product moves as it absorbs and loses humidity. This is one of my favorite affordable constructions of wood. I think this is the best possible construction. This is a perfectly balanced engineered floor where the veneer on the surface is the same exact thickness, same exact species as what's on the back of the product. So this product is perfectly balanced. Like what's pulling on the surface is pulling in the same strength on the bottom of the product. I don't know what sandwich that is, but I have a feeling it's a pricey one. This is certainly one of the most expensive ways to make a wood floor, but it's awesome, and it's a great performer.
You talk a lot about balance. Why is it important?
Because wood moves, so as the wood absorbs humidity levels, it swells, and as it loses humidity, it shrinks. Balance is important though, because again, the wood moves in the width, right? And that's why we can go wider with an engineered wood floor. A solid piece of wood, there's no balancing layers. As this thing absorbs humidity, it's all moving in one direction, okay? As it loses or absorbs humidity. That's why we're very careful to make sure that we don't go too wide with a solid wood floor. I love having this in here because it's a great example of what happens to wood. Essentially, we had this tree trunk, and just over time, it's shrunk as it's lost humidity. And that's what happens to wood. As it loses moisture, the product shrinks, and in shrinking, it cracks. That certainly relates to flooring, and it helps me manage the expectations. We're a big proponent of making sure that wood floors don't get installed until climate controls are running in a building. And I'm always very nervous when we're putting them in the fall. And we go from these really high humidity levels to very, very low humidity levels because the heaters are cranking and drying all the air, the moisture out of the air. So it's a great example to hammer home what can happen if you don't manage the space correctly and what can happen to the wood floors.
What is the rule of thumb with refinishing engineered wood floors?
It's actually a BS rule of thumb, but the rule of thumb is that for every millimeter of thickness, you get a sanding. I could get rid of a millimeter of wood pretty quickly with a belt sander. So it's the standard, but I don't put a lot of weight into it.
Why do you think veneer thickness is overpaid for?
Just because the question is how many times can I sand and refinish this floor? First of all, if there's 600 units, 599 of them are not gonna get sanded and refinished ever. But the other aspect of it is the bigger these products are, both in terms of width and in thickness, the more susceptible they are to movement as the humidity levels fluctuate. The actual finish itself is so much more important than how thick the product is.
How are wood floors installed?
The three methods is to either nail the product, glue, or float it. Floating is the least expensive way to put a floor in. Maybe you're worried about plank replacement at some point. Floating makes that easier. No neighbors are getting disturbed. As the finish technology has advanced, I've become a big fan of gluing floors down.
What is hardwood's effect on the environment?
So wood's renewable, okay? So as long as we're harvesting it in a responsible manner, it's a renewable resource with very minimal impact on the environment. And then there's the aspects, the benefits of wood. Right? Wood is obviously a healthy product. There's a lot of studies that show that it actually filters the air inside a building. There's a lot of third-party certifications that look at all aspects of it to make sure that it is being done responsibly. A lot of that is the way it's sourced, where it's sourced, but it's cradle to grave, where they're literally from the time that the wood is harvested all the way through manufacturing to the time it gets to the flooring contractor and onto the job. So they're managing all types of criteria. There's lots of different areas where they look at it to make sure that it's being as green as it possibly can.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So you're talking about the advancements.
So I guess we got to start over. Sorry. As well as the ability. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Why don't you just tell us about this crack in the wood? This fissure.